recent loss in London that saw Aaron Rodgers throw 3 interceptions that were actually Robert Saleh's fault. We reviewed it. He got in there, was tipping the ball. Saleh goes 20 for 36 in his 3.5 somewhat year tenure. DC Jeff Ulbrich will be the interim head coach. Saleh reportedly blindsided by the firing. Nick, were you?
Little surprised by the timing of it, even though I should have just listened to Coach. Coach Mangini was like, you embarrassed Woody Johnson in front of his fancy British friends. You're out of there.
Exactly
Coach nailed it. And so I'm in a bit of a weird spot because I'm pretty well documented that I don't think Robert Saleh is a good head coach. Mm-hmm. And the evidence I have is his 56-game tenure.
Sure.
And so 20 and 36, that is a bottom 10 winning percentage of any coach of the last quarter century who got at least 50 games. Yeah, and so I don't think he was a very good head coach. I also think firing him and keeping Nat Hackett is an indefensible decision.
Thank you.
And so I think you can, smart people have argued, and they might be right, that if you bring him back to start the year and don't fire him when Mike Vrabel's available, when maybe you could get Belichick, when you could go with one of those young offensive minds, that you've got to give him more than 5 games.
Yeah.
I understand that logic. I don't know if that's 100% certain. What I do know is if you're going to bring the whole staff back and then 5 games in say it's a disaster that we have to find a way to salvage, keeping the coach who is, in my opinion, most responsible for the part of your team that's a disaster, which is the offense, is indefensible, unless, of course, simply because one guy Aaron Rodgers actually likes, and the other guy Aaron Rodgers just pretends to like. And so, and I didn't know you were going to do it off top of the show, but Brew, and this isn't about, us arguing about it, I do think it was over this moment. I think the moment that moment when they took a 2-score lead on the Patriots was the most jubilant moment Robert Saleh has had in at least 2 years and maybe his whole head coaching career.
Also the best Rodgers has played in 18 months.
Correct. And it should have just been a true moment of joy for a guy in Saleh who, again, even if I thought he was in over his head, has dealt with a lot of crap.
Yep.
And Rodgers couldn't even let him have that. Yeah. And so if you're going to fire people, and you want to fire the head coach, fine. But leaving Nat Hackett in there because Rodgers likes playing darts and bags with him is an outrage.
So quickly before I go to you, Brew, Rich Cimini, it wasn't really a report from Rich Cimini, but he was listening to the press conference. He wrote,
I saw this too.
Yeah, I don't think it's fait accompli that Hackett will remain in his current role as OC. So he wasn't fired, obviously, but maybe Ulbrich will make some changes.
Obviously, if one coach was going to be fired, it should have been Hackett. What is he doing? What is Hackett doing? Yeah. Other than looking terrible with his boy Aaron Rodgers, I'm not going to bat for a guy that won 36% of his games. But one word comes to mind: scapegoat.
Oh.
Scapegoat. All right, because, again, he's not Vince Lombardi. We all know that. But he's a defensive coach, right? That's what he's great at.
Yep.
And their defense has been great. They're top 5 in just about everything. Sacks, points allowed, yards allowed. The problem is the offense. And look, we'll get into later how much Aaron Rodgers had to do with this. One thing that's undeniable is that had Rodgers played fairly well the last 2 weeks, they'd be 4-1, at the very least 3-2.
Yeah.
And Robert Saleh would still be the head coach.
100%.
So I think he's scapegoated. I think Woody Johnson, Coach was right on the money with him being embarrassed up in London. He wants to do something. But I also think he's looking at it like, to the fans. The fans see this season slipping away. I see this season. He said this is the best team in 25 years. I see it slipping away. He's saying, let me do something to appease the fans. The fans want something. They want something done, and this gives the impression that, okay, change is about to happen. I don't think it works necessarily.
I agree.
But now let me read this one quote, too, from Woody that stuck out to me. Because you've heard about Saleh maybe too buddy-buddy with the players, right? This quote from Woody Johnson: Jeff Ulbrich is a tough coach who has the respect of the coaches and players on the team. So maybe Saleh wasn't. We heard Quincy Williams after the game say against Minnesota, we need accountability. You know, you can't just be saying the same thing. So maybe Saleh wasn't tough enough in that locker room. And that's usually how it happens. You got a player's coach, you bring in a tough coach. You got a tough coach, you bring in a player's coach. Yep. So maybe that's what Ulbrich is, and he'll clean things up and really dot their I's and cross the T's with the locker room, and you'll see a change.
I think that is sound analysis. The odd part of it is the one tough thing that we saw Saleh do
is why he's gone.
Is say, you know what? It's an unexcused absence, this trip to Egypt, that I'm not going to tell you what it is. It was and he's still going to be fined. And I think the push was obviously like a symptom of that, but I think the root cause may have been there or further back when they were trying to get rid of Saleh. Excuse me, when they tried to get rid of Hackett.
Quickly though, if Rodgers doesn't like Saleh or doesn't whatever, he should have got rid of him before.
I think he
could have done it.
Right, but you could, if they were going to get rid of him, it had to be right after the season. This is why I agree with Wild's diagnosis. I think he was cool with Saleh until the unexcused absence. You can't, but nobody fires their coach in July. Right. You know what I mean? So like I think to me, that was the moment the relationship turned, and again, I don't think Robert Saleh is a good head coach, and he got more time than a lot of guys would have. But this is just an outrageous chain of events, and I agree with what you're saying, Brew, in general about players coach to tough nose coach, whatever it is. That doesn't, in my opinion, really apply to interims, because interim coach is who's in the building, and it's usually one of the two coordinators. And so they had the opportunity of Nat Hackett, who I said I thought could happen at some point.
Yeah.
But he had failed.
You think they would go if they a day ago?
Yes.
If you thought?
Yeah, because I thought that in my opinion, the Jets are still trying to keep up the charade that Aaron Rodgers isn't in charge of quite literally everything. And so I thought that if they fired Saleh, they would be like, all right, listen, everybody obviously knows this guy runs the thing, so let's make his buddy the head coach and see what happens. I mean, because right now, who is in charge? Because it's not Jeff Ulbrich. With respect to him, he might end up.
People do think he's going to be a good head coach. But obviously,
Aaron Rodgers is in charge
absolutely
of everything.
Or Hackett would be gone.
Yeah.
Period.
Or Woody Johnson.
He would be gone.
Yeah. So here's the other thing that Woody Johnson, he had this press conference shortly before we came on the air. He said, this was my decision and mine alone. He tried to basically pour cold water on the idea that Rodgers was involved. I'll take him at his word.
I won't.
As challenging as that is for me, but I'm just trying to be a nice guy. Here's the thing. And I had Josh look this up. Someone in Woody Johnson's small circle should be like, hey, this actually has no history of working, of trying to turn the ship this early in the season. So 27 head coaches have been fired in the Super Bowl era before the sixth game of the season. Only one of them made the playoffs.
And that one, if I'm not mistaken, he took over for Gruden?
Yes.
So Gruden wasn't fired for the team being bad.
That's right.
He was fired because there was kind of like for terrible emails and stuff he did. So that's almost a different scenario entirely.
You could argue
so
that
it's really like 0 for 26.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the idea that, like, you know what, new coach coming in, it's not David Blatt, Ty Lue. There's no history of this working and turning something around. But it's not going to work.
The other thing Woody said was, I talked to Aaron last night.
Oh, yeah, this is a whole.
And this didn't come up.
No.
And Wild's tweet was right, which is, okay, well, if you're telling the truth, that's ridiculous, and if you're lying, that's ridiculous. Like the, I mean, either the idea that you talked to Aaron Monday night and didn't know yet or decided I'm keeping it from him, neither of those make sense. But if you're telling the truth, that means either you were like, I don't want to know how Aaron feels about this. That's not great.
Yep.
Or it's Monday night, you didn't think you were firing him. And then Tuesday, you were. None of it's good.
None of it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why the Jets are the Jets.
That's exactly right. That is why the Jets are the Jets.
Meanwhile, after a 2-3 start and a recent loss in London that saw Aaron Rodgers throw 3 interceptions that were actually Robert Saleh's fault. We reviewed it. He got in there, was tipping the ball. Saleh goes 20 for 36 in his 3.5 somewhat year tenure. DC Jeff Ulbrich will be the interim head coach. Saleh reportedly blindsided by the firing. Nick, were you?
Little surprised by the timing of it, even though I should have just listened to Coach. Coach Mangini was like, you embarrassed Woody Johnson in front of his fancy British friends. You're out of there.
That's exactly
Coach
what he
nailed
said.
it. And so I'm going to bit of a weird spot because I'm pretty well documented that I don't think Robert Saleh is a good head coach. And the evidence